The deeper they moved into the jungle, the colder the air became. The glowing trees faded into black shadows, and the strange music of the jungle went silent. Jack felt at first an odd pressure in the air. Like walking underwater, Zira gripped his arm tighter, as if she could feel it too. Her body shook, not from fear, but from something else, something building inside her. They found shelter beneath a rocky overhang, half covered by thick vines and moss. Jack helped her sit, gently checking her burns and cuts. Most of the wounds had stopped bleeding, but some were too deep to heal on their own. He pulled out a small medical patch and pressed it to her side. She winced, but didn't complain. Her glowing eyes watching him closely. "You're healing faster than anyone I've ever seen," Jack said softly. Zira didn't reply right away, but after a moment, she whispered, "It's starting." Jack looked at her with confusion. "What's starting?" Zira's skin shimmered faintly. The strange purple markings on her arms began to glow brighter. "My body reacts when I'm close to death," she said, her voice shaking. "It wants to protect itself, but it doesn't know how to stop." Jack leaned back, unsure what to make of it. She wasn't just alien in appearance, there was something inside her. Something powerful and unstable. Zira clutched her chest suddenly, gasping. Her body arched, and her skin pulsed with light. Jack reached out in alarm, but before he could touch her, a wave of energy burst out from her. It wasn't fire or lightning, but pure force shoving everything back. Jack was thrown against the wall of the cave. Dust and rocks falling from above, he groaned, trying to get up. His blaster knocked from his hand. Zira collapsed, her breathing shallow again, but the glow in her eyes remained. Jack crawled over, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Zira, talk to me," Kay said, shaking her gently. Her voice was weak, but clear. "They want that power. That's why they burn us alive." Jack felt sick, the truth hitting him harder than the blast. The tribes weren't just killers, they were harvesters. They believed Zira's energy gave them strength, and maybe, in a twisted way, they were right. But to Jack, she wasn't some source of power. She was just a girl who'd suffered enough. He didn't care what was inside her, or how rare she was. All he cared about was getting her to safety. Suddenly, a loud howl echoed through the jungle. Then another, and another. Closer each time, Zira sat up fast, eyes wide with panic. "They're coming," she whispered. They felt the pulse. Jack grabbed his blaster and pulled Zira to her feet. He looked around, thinking fast, heart racing. They couldn't fight not like this, not when she could barely stand, but they also couldn't stay. Zira pointed through the thick vines. "Toward the east, there's a place. Old ruins. My people once lived there." Jack didn't hesitate. "Let's move." He supported her again, letting her lean on him as they stumbled through the brush. Every step felt heavier. The forest pressing in, eyes watched them from the trees. Low growls in the distance, Zira whispered something in her native tongue Jack couldn't understand, but he could feel her fear and her strength. "Why are they hunting you?" he asked. She answered slowly, "Because my blood holds memory, power from those before me. They believe if they eat me, they will steal that power." Jack clenched his teeth, disgusted. "We'll make sure they never get the chance," he said. As they moved, Zira's glow faded slightly. Her strength was returning, but too slowly. They reached a broken stone path, half buried under roots and vines. Strange symbols covered the stones, glowing faintly when Zira stepped near. Jack realized they were close to something ancient, something sacred. Zira touched the stones gently, as if remembering them. "This place, it was our temple." Before the flames, a deep rumble rolled beneath their feet as they stepped further. The ground opened slightly, revealing stairs leading down into darkness. Jack hesitated, but Zira nodded. "They won't follow us here. Not yet." He helped her down carefully, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The temperature dropped even lower, but Jack didn't mind. For the first time, they were ahead of the hunters. Below, in the heart of the ruin, Sci collapsed again. Jack caught her before she hit the ground. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "My power. It's not under control." Jack looked down at her, brushing hair from her face. "We'll figure it out together," he said, because no matter how strange, how dangerous, how different she wasn't alone anymore. And he wasn't about to leave her behind. The ancient staircase led deeper than Jack expected. Each step creaked with age, and the walls pulsed faintly with old blue symbols. Zyra's faint glow matched them as if her presence woke up the forgotten stone. She leaned on Jack's arm, her legs shaking, her breath slow but steady. The air grew heavier the deeper they went, filled with dust and old memories. But behind them, the jungle still howled with danger, so they pressed forward into the unknown. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a wide chamber. Massive columns lined the room, cracked with time and wrapped in hanging roots. In the center sat a broken altar, covered in vines and dried moss. Light came only from Zyra's glowing skin and the pulsing symbols around them. Jack scanned the area, cautious but curious. He had never seen tech and nature blend like this before. This was older than human maps, older than any known alien structure he had studied. Zyra stepped forward and touched the altar with trembling fingers. A hum filled the air, a low tone like a song from the stone. The roots shifted and the moss peeled away, revealing deep carvings underneath. "These are my people's words," Zyra said softly, a language almost lost. She traced the symbols slowly, reading them aloud to awaken the heart of the protector. Blood must remember, and purpose must be pure. Jack stepped closer. "What does it mean?" Zyra looked at him, her eyes shining. "There was once a guardian, not a person, but a force. It slept here, bound to our kind." She moved her hand over a bowl carved into the stone. Without fear, she bit her palm and let her glowing blood drip into the bowl. Jack stepped back, unsure if it was safe, but trusting her anyway. The moment her blood touched the stone, the room lit up. The columns glowed brighter. The air shook and the altar split open. A hidden staircase emerged, spiraling downward even deeper. Zyra stumbled back into Jack's arms. Drained, Jack whispered, "You didn't have to do that alone." She smiled weakly. "I did, 'cause it must answer to me first." They descended again, and this time the air turned warm and dry. Below, they found a smaller chamber, and in it sat a floating orb. It was surrounded by what looked like a stasis field. Humming quietly, Jack walked around it carefully. Eyes wide, the orb wasn't metal, not crystalline, pulsed like a heart. Zyra knelt in front of it, her hand hovering inches above. "This is the seed of a hero," she whispered, "our last protector. Our only defense." Jack nodded slowly. "Can it help us escape?" Zyra looked at him, unsure, maybe. "But it needs guidance, and it drains the one who uses it." Jack frowned, "Like it drained you before." She nodded, "Yes. And if I'm not strong enough this time, it could kill me." They didn't have time to debate. Above them, a loud roar echoed through the stone. The tribal aliens had found the first staircase. The time for rest was over. Jack turned to Zyra. "Can you use it again?" Zyra stood shakily. "I'll try. But I'll need you to guard me." Jack took position near the stairs, gripping his blaster tight. His hands were steady now. More doubt. No more hesitation. Zyra placed both hands on the orb and closed her eyes. Her markings glowed again, brighter and faster than before. Light spread from her fingers into the orb, and the entire chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling as the symbols on the walls came alive. Zyra cried out, but didn't stop. The orb rose higher, pulsing with energy. Above, the first tribal alien appeared at the stairs, then a second and third. Jack fired warning shots, keeping them at bay. The blast echoed loud in the chamber, and more footsteps rushed behind. Zyra screamed as the orb burned her palms. Jack turned briefly. "Hold on, Zyra. You can do this." She gritted her teeth, her voice shaking. "I'm not letting them." "Take this again." The orb suddenly cracked with power and exploded in a wave of energy, not a blast to kill, but a force that threw the tribal aliens back. They tumbled down the steps, weapons flying. The chamber filled with golden light, and a protective shield wrapped around the room. Zyra collapsed again, but this time Jack caught her before she hit the floor. She was barely conscious, her breath shallow. The orb floated gently back into its stasis shell, calm once more. Jack held her close, whispering, "You did it. You stopped them." Zyra opened one eye, smiling faintly. For now, they were safe. But only for a moment. The energy from the seed wouldn't last forever. Jack knew they needed to move before the tribals found another way in. But now he also knew the truth. Zyra wasn't just a survivor. She was the key to something powerful, ancient and sacred. And he would protect her with his life. Whatever this protector was, it had chosen her, and Jack had chosen her too. The golden shield around the chamber slowly faded as the orb returned to stillness. Jack knew the protection wouldn't last. He looked down at Zyra. Her eyes were closed, her body weak, her breathing shallow. She had given everything to activate the seed of Ahira, and now her body was paying the price. Jack gently lifted her in his arms and whispered, "We have to move." He climbed the stairs quickly, one careful step at a time. Zyra's light had dimmed, but her warmth was still there. Above, the silence was broken only by the wind. No chants, no footsteps, no cries. Yet Jack knew better. The tribals had not given up. They were regrouping, hunting in silence now. At the top of the ruins, the jungle waited like a predator. Jack stepped into the overgrowth, the thick vines brushing his legs as he moved. The stars above were hidden. Behind layers of dark leaves, the forest felt colder now. More alive somehow, he held Zyra tighter, whispering, "We're not far. Just hold on." She stirred slightly, her head resting against his chest. "They'll come again," she murmured. "They won't stop until I'm dead." Jack's voice was firm. "Then they'll have to get through me first." He spotted a narrow path leading deeper into the wild. It sloped downward into a muddy ravine where old stone statues watched silently from the sides. He slipped through, his boots sinking in wet ground. Suddenly, the quiet snapped behind him. A horn blew, loud and sharp. Jack turned his head fast. Catching a glimpse of fire through the trees, they had found them again. Tribal hunters leaped from the bushes with snarls, their bodies painted with glowing symbols. Jack ducked and rolled behind a rock. Shielding Zyra, he fired his blaster 3 times, the bright shots lighting the jungle in short bursts. 2 attackers dropped, stunned by the energy bursts. But more came, screeching like animals, their spears cutting through the air. Jack moved fast. Dodging a blow aimed at Zyra, he kicked one alien in the chest and spun around another, firing. Again, a spear grazed his shoulder, burning through his jacket. Blood ran down his arm. But he didn't stop. He could not stop not with Zyra in his arms. They broke through the brush into a clearing full of sharp rocks and broken trees. Jack ducked behind a fallen log and laid Zyra down gently. He pulled a second energy cell from his belt and slammed it into the blaster. He took a deep breath. Aiming at the shadows moving through the trees, Zyra whispered something soft. Ancient words that pulsed with energy. Suddenly, the roots around them began to shift. Moving slowly, vines crept up from the ground, wrapping around the rocks and forming a loose barrier. Jack stared in surprise. "Are you doing that?" Zyra nodded weakly. "The seed, ... It changed something in me." He looked back at the vines, growing faster now. blocking off 2 of the 3 paths. It wasn't a perfect shield, but it bought them time. Jack turned to face the only open path. Raising his blaster, he wasn't going to let them touch her again. The first tribal came charging through, wild and fast. Jack hit him center mass with a single shot, dropping him instantly. The next 2 came from the sides. Jack rolled left, ducked, then fired. The jungle echoed with the sound of battle, glowing flashes lighting up the trees. But Jack was tiring, and the aliens just kept coming. Suddenly, Zira sat up, eyes glowing. Bright again, she raised her hand, and the vines responded. Lashing forward and grabbing one of the attackers, Jack's jaw dropped. "You're awake?" Zira stood slowly, still shaky but stronger now. "I can't let you fight alone anymore," she said, her voice calm but fierce. Together, they held the clearing. Jack firing while Zira controlled the vines. Her connection to the jungle grew. Stronger with each breath, she moved her hands and roots shot up from the ground, slamming into enemies and throwing them back. Jack smiled through the sweat and blood. "Now that's what I call teamwork." But even with their efforts, more torches appeared in the distance, hundreds of them, forming a wall of light. The main force had arrived, and they were completely surrounded. Jack looked at Zira, his smile fading. This might be the end. Zira stepped forward, raising her glowing hand. "No," she said, "this is just the beginning." She reached into her cloak and pulled out a shard of the seed, its core still pulsing with faint light. She looked at Jack with steady eyes. "I'll give everything to protect what's left." Jack shook his head. Not alone. He stepped beside her, blaster raised again. Together, they faced the flames moving in from all sides. And though the night was filled with danger and death, neither of them backed down, because some things are worth fighting for, and some people worth dying for. The jungle clearing burned with firelight from every side. Hundreds of tribal aliens closed in slowly, their faces painted with glowing war marks. Their spears clashed against their shields, sending a rhythm through the ground. Jack stood tall with his blaster raised, his body shaking with exhaustion and pain. Beside him, Zira held the shard of the seed tightly in her hands. Her hair floated slightly, lifted by a strange wind that didn't touch the trees. "They won't stop," Jack said, breathing heavily. "They'll come through fire and blood." Zira didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving silently. The shard pulsed faster, each beat matching her heartbeat. Jack turned to her, worried. "Zira, if you burn out again." She opened her eyes, and they were no longer just glowing. They were shining like twin suns. "I remember now," she said softly, but the words echoed with power. The seed didn't just awaken her strength, awakened her memories of ancestors long gone, of voices deep in her blood. Her fingers opened, and the shard floated upward, spinning in place. Energy spiraled around her, rising into the sky like a silent storm. The tribal army paused, some stepping back in fear. Their chants faltered as they stared at the girl they had once tied to a spit. Now, she hovered a few inches off the ground, surrounded by light. Zira's voice grew louder, speaking in her ancient tongue. The symbols on the trees, the stones, even the ground began to glow again. Jack could only watch in awe, his heart pounding with both fear and pride. The same girl he had found broken and burned now stood as a force of nature. Vines from the earth twisted and grew rapidly, rising like towers around the clearing. Roots shot out and knocked away tribal warriors trying to charge forward. Zira raised her arms and the air cracked, splitting the night with a flash. A wave of energy burst outward, not fire, not destruction, but something pure. It passed through Jack like a wind through his soul, warm and heavy with emotion. He staggered, blinking tears from his eyes. Zira's voice echoed across the jungle, ancient and powerful. The tribal aliens screamed in confusion. many falling to their knees. Others dropped their weapons and ran. Jack looked around, stunned. Zyra, what did you do? She lowered back to the ground gently, the light dimming around her, but her form remained changed, more defined, more graceful. She looked older, stronger. Her presence almost divine. I showed them truth, she said. Her voice calm, a memory they cannot erase. The clearing now held silence, broken only by the soft hum of the seed shards still floating above her. Some of the tribals stayed frozen in place, their minds overwhelmed. Zyra stepped forward, and wherever her feet touched the earth, flowers bloomed in her path. These lands were never meant for hate, she said, but they were twisted by fear. Jack lowered his blaster slowly, his hands still shaking. Are you still you? He asked carefully. Zyra turned to him with a small, tired smile. Yes, Jack. I'm still me. She touched his face gently. But now I remember who I was. And why I was hunted. She explained quietly that her people were guardians once, chosen to protect balance not by weapons, but by memory and connection to the living world. But when invaders came, when fear spread, her people were seen as dangerous. So they were hunted, cooked, consumed, believed to hold stolen power. But it was never stolen, it was shared freely with those who lived in peace. Zyra looked at the remaining tribals, still shaking in the grass. I don't want revenge, she whispered. I want an end. She stepped closer to one of the kneeling hunters, a blade still clutched in his hand. He looked up at her, trembling, waiting for judgment. Zyra bent down and placed her hand over his heart. The blade turned to dust in his grasp, and he wept. Jack stepped beside her, silent. He didn't fully understand her power, but he understood her heart, and it was stronger than any weapon he had seen. Zyra leaned against him, the energy draining away. Her body was still flesh and blood, and it was tired. Jack helped her walk. Both of them, stepping away from the battlefield, turned garden. The jungle behind them slowly returned to life, birds calling, leaves rustling, stars blinking above. The seed shard floated down and dimmed. Resting in Zyra's hand once more, she placed it in a small pouch and tied it to her belt. The battle had ended, but the war was not forgotten. And Zyra had awakened more than her strength. She had awakened hope. Jack looked at her as they walked, his arm around her shoulders. You're amazing, he said, smiling softly. Zyra leaned her head on his arm, whispering, No, Jack. Oh, we're amazing. The jungle looked different in the daylight. Sunlight passed through the high canopy like golden rivers. The chaos of the night was gone, replaced by quiet birdsong and calm winds. Jack walked beside Zyra on a narrow dirt path, cut through wild grass and thick vines. She walked slowly, still weak, but the glow in her skin remained steady. It was not the same fierce shine as during the battle. It was softer now. Like a heartbeat, they had left the battlefield behind, the seeds safely hidden inside Zyra's pouch. Most of the tribals had vanished into the forest, scattered and afraid. A few had stayed behind to bury their dead and kneel in silence. Zyra hadn't punished them, hadn't spoken harshly. She had only looked at them with gentle eyes and said, Change begins in the heart. Jack didn't know what the future held. He only knew one thing: he wasn't leaving Zyra's side. Not now, not ever. They reached the edge of a human outpost built near a landing pad. A metal tower blinked red beside a wide platform with an old transport ship parked on it. When the guards saw Jack and Zyra approaching, their rifles lifted immediately, but Jack raised a hand and shouted, It's me, tan down. The gate opened, and a medic rushed forward with a stretcher. Zyra shook her head, refusing it. I will walk, she said softly. I'm not broken anymore. Jack smiled at her courage. Guiding her forward slowly inside the outpost, the commander met them personally. His eyes widened as he saw Zyra, not just as a survivor, but as something far more. Jack gave a full report, leaving out none of the horrors. When he told them what the tribes had done to Zyra, the room fell silent. But when he described what she had become, how she had stopped the war without a single death, everyone listened. The scientist wanted to study her, of course, but Jack stepped in front and said, "She's not a subject. She's a survivor and she's with me." Zyra looked at him in surprise, and then, for the first time since they met, she smiled without sadness. Over the next few days, Zyra rested in a quiet room with flowers placed by the nurses. Children of the human workers peeked into the window and stared in awe at her glowing skin. She waved at them shyly, laughing softly when they ran away. Giggling for the first time, she felt safe, not hunted, not feared. Jack stayed close, helping her adjust to the strange human customs. One evening, they sat under a quiet tree beside the outpost's edge. Jack handed her a small drink pouch, and she sipped carefully. "It tastes sweet," she said, surprised. "It's called mango," Jack replied, grinning. "Earth Fruit Trail Classic." She looked up at the stars, then back at him. "Your world. Does it have forests like this?" Jack nodded. "Some, but none with glowing roots or talking trees." Zyra laughed, a soft sound that made Jack's heart warm. "I'd like to see Earth one day," she said. "You will," he promised. "And not as a prisoner or a specimen, just as Zyra. Soon." News of what happened began to spread across nearby settlements. Some called her a savior, others a myth. But the truth was simple: she had survived cruelty and chose peace. She had power and chose mercy. Zyra was not a goddess, not a weapon. She was a girl who still cried at night and still smiled at birds. She was real, and Jack respected her for that more than anything. One morning, Jack found her standing at the edge of the landing pad. She wore human clothes, now simple, soft, but she still kept the seed tied at her waist. She turned to him, her eyes calm. "I want to help others like me." Jack nodded. "Then let's do it." They left the outpost together, not as fugitives, but as symbols of something new. Over the months, they traveled from planet to planet. Zyra spoke in temples and markets. She found other survivors of her kind, hidden, broken, afraid. She offered them something no one else had: hope, and beside her, Jack stood always ready, not to lead, but to protect. They never went back to the jungle. They didn't need to. Because what was born in that fire, the scream, the rescue, the bond, it lived inside them now. Unbreakable. Sometimes Zyra would hold Jack's hand and whisper, "You saved me." But Jack would smile and say, "No, Zyra, you saved yourself. I just followed the scream."